So the Xiaomi 14 Pro is here and it's finally in our studio all the way from China. Of course, we had to import the first Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 phone and we had to see what improvements has Xiaomi made to the camera setup this time around. There are a few interesting changes that I'm going to talk about in this video as well and give you my first impressions along with a performance review and camera test as well. So stay tuned till the end of the video to see if you should wait for the Xiaomi 14 Pro when it launches in India. If you are here for the first time, I'm Ashad, you're watching Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. So talking about the phone and the design of the phone itself, it's a very premium looking phone. I'm not a fan of this jade green color per se because it seems to be done to death right now, but it still looks very, very good. What I like about the build itself is the fact that Xiaomi has used a ceramic glass this time around. They call it Xiaomi ceramic glass and they claim that it is tougher than actual regular glass. The glass at the front and the back is both ceramic glass and it's 10x stronger than regular glass and it's also 1.25 times better scratch resistant as well. And you know what? It does feel sturdy. We can drop it like this and literally we've dropped it for many videos. The Hindi one, the Tamil one, and now the English one, and we are not worried about the build quality at all. In fact, there were a few videos by Chinese YouTubers where they were like hitting nails into walls with the phone's glass itself. That apart, you've got the frame that's made of stainless steel on this variant, but there's a special edition variant with titanium as well. So build quality wise, damn good. But yes, this square camera module is massive, and when you place it on a table, there is quite a bit of table wobble at the top, but generally when you place it on a table, you use the bottom part, so that doesn't really matter too much. That apart, you've got the power button, you've got the volume rocker, and you've got a Type-C port. And this Type-C port now supports faster Gen 3.2 speeds. Thank you, Xiaomi. It's not USB Gen 2.0 like the Xiaomi 13 Pro. And of course, you've got stereo speaker setups, a SIM card tray that accepts 2 nano SIM cards as well. And as is the case with almost every single Xiaomi phone out there, you've got an infrared blaster too. Plus, the Xiaomi 14 Pro also has IP68 certification, so that's very good as well. So overall, with respect to the design and the build quality, I like it. I like it a lot actually. But what's even more impressive is that display on the front. So Xiaomi calls this display all around liquid display. Of course, that's their marketing term. But what they've done is they've added a subtle curvature on all the 4 corners and at the sides as well. So it feels like the display itself is suspended and gives you the experience of using a flat display despite it being a curved one. And because of this design of the display, what you get are the positives of the flat display as well. For example, when it falls, it will be better impact resistant than other curved displays in general, and accidental touch prevention is much better as well. And also on all the 4 corners, you've got symmetrical, very slim bezels, including the chin as well. So the screen estate is fantastic on this display. Plus, the quality of the display is fantastic too. So this is a 6.73-inch AMOLED panel with 120Hz of refresh rate. LTPO technology is also available, so 1 to 120Hz is possible. That apart, Xiaomi has used a TCL C8 light emitting technology as well, so with which they've managed to actually achieve a 3000 nits of peak brightness when you're watching HDR content. And of course, Xiaomi phones support Dolby Vision even in the mid-range, so of course the 14 Pro also supports Dolby Vision in Netflix, but unfortunately our Chinese unit doesn't have Dolby Vision support on Netflix right now, but definitely when the global launch happens and when the India launch happens, Dolby Vision support should be there. But HDR works well on YouTube, and you've got an original Pro color mode as well with fantastic color accuracy. This is a superb display, bar none. And since this is an AMOLED panel, you get an in-display fingerprint scanner, very fast to unlock as well. And the haptic feedback implementation has been done very well too. So you get precise vibration feedback when you're typing, when you're using the system, across the system and the UI. Xiaomi has implemented it really well. Also, you get 1920Hz of PWM dimming as well. So if you are sensitive to low light flicker on high refresh rate displays, that's not going to be a problem on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. Now, along with the display, you also do need a good set of speakers. So the stereo speakers do have Dolby Atmos support, and Dolby Atmos sounds really good. Take a listen for yourself and let me know what you guys think. And for the audiophiles in the house, it has support for high-res wired mode and high-res wireless mode as well. So LHDC, LDAC, all the Bluetooth codecs are supported. Now talking about the battery, you get a 4880 mAh battery inside with 120 watt fast charging support. You get the charger inside the box, and you also get 50 watt fast wireless charging support, and reverse wireless charging is also supported at 10 watt speeds. Generally on most phones you get 5 watt speeds, but on this one 10 watt, pretty good. Now, while I move on to our performance testing, before that, what's interesting on the Xiaomi 14 Pro is that this is globally the first phone to be launched with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. And Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is a fantastic system on chip. Now, this variant of the phone that we have is a 12GB, 256GB variant, and in China at least, Xiaomi is selling up to 16GB RAM and 1TB of storage as well. And this is LPDDR5X RAM and UFS 4.0 storage too. So performance-wise, it's fantastic. We ran Antutu and we got a score of over 2 million points, which is of course higher than the 1.6 million that we managed with the Asus ROG Phone 7 Ultimate and the Realme GT5. So definitely quite an improvement in Antutu scores when compared to the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 phones that we tested in the past. Now in Geekbench, we got a single core score of about 2174 points and a multi-core score of over 7000 points. In comparison with the S23 Ultra, it's about a 5 to 10% increase in single core points, and multi-core score has jumped 30%. So if you have heavy workloads and if you need a multi-threaded performance, Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 inside the Xiaomi 14 Pro will be fantastic. But I'm sure that you guys want to know if the phone throttles or not. So we ran the CPU throttle test, which we generally do 40 threads for 30 minutes in the performance mode. And after that test, we got a CPU stability score of 82%, which is fantastic. Anything above 80% is really, really good. Having said that, if you do use the Xiaomi 14 Pro in performance mode, it does get very hot. With the CPU throttle test, after 30 minutes, the temperature touched almost 50 degrees. So that's one thing that you have to keep in mind. We also did run 3D Mark wildlife stress test like we gently do, and we got a stability of about 71%. This is definitely higher than the 65% that we achieved with the Samsung Galaxy S23 Ultra. But again, I have to mention this, the Xiaomi 14 Pro did reach 50 degrees in temperature and lost about 17% battery as well. Again, we ran this in performance mode too. Now, one of the things about the 8 Gen 3 is that hardware-enabled ray tracing has also been improved by quite a bit. However, RT-enabled games on Android are still not available, so we haven't been able to test any games per se. But there is a benchmark test, the 3D Mark Solar Bay test, which we did run on this. So in that test, the 14 Pro with the 8 Gen 3 scored above 8000 points and about 31 FPS. In comparison, the S23 Ultra scored about 5600 points and 21.21 FPS. So definitely you can see an improvement in FPS and in performance of RT in general on the 8 Gen 3 compared to the 8 Gen 2. Now, generally, we do also run a gaming test on most of our high-end flagship phones where we capture the FPS data and figure out what average FPS we get, and we play Genshin Impact for about 30 minutes. Unfortunately, we couldn't run our test that we generally do because it required a bootloader unlock, and the Xiaomi 14 Pro currently, if you need a bootloader unlock, you have to actually make a request on the community forum. And if you do end up unlocking the bootloader, then you can kiss goodbye to updates, because Xiaomi has said that anybody who unlocks the bootloader will not get HyperOS updates. So we didn't want to go through all of that trouble in an imported unit, but we did end up playing Genshin Impact regardless. And we didn't notice too many frame drops when we were playing the game either. Having said that, if you want a proper gaming test on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, wait for the Indian unit or the global unit when it comes to us. Now, with respect to graphics settings, what we noticed is that COD runs at 120 FPS, basically medium and ultra. And you can play BGMI at 60 FPS as well. And the Ultra HDR option is available too. But I have a feeling that 8 Gen 3 will be able to run these games at higher graphics and better frame rates as well. Currently, it's a little too early for all of these games to be optimized for the 8 Gen 3 and the Xiaomi 14 Pro as a result, so we'll have to wait and watch. So performance-wise on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, if you do end up using the performance mode, it will get really hot, but it doesn't throttle. If you're okay with throttling, then you can, bump it down to balanced mode and it doesn't heat up too much. Regardless, this could also be a Chinese variant specific issue, and when the global, ROM comes out, the tuning could be slightly different. Now, before I talk about the camera, there's also HyperOS, which is the replacement to MIUI on the Xiaomi 14 Pro, running for the very first time HyperOS 1.0 based on Android 14. Now, HyperOS itself is very similar to MIUI, and also it takes a lot of inspiration from iOS and Google's Pixel as well. So the control center looks like iOS. The lock screen implementation is also very similar to iOS. And with respect to the Pixel implementation, well, there is generative AI based photo editing features in the Gallery app, and that's also very similar to Pixel's implementation. You can change the sky, you can erase objects, all of those things. But yes, Xiaomi used to change the sky with the camera app itself, but now you can do that on the Gallery as well with the generative AI feature. Again, it's too soon to talk about HyperOS because the global implementation could be slightly different, so we'll have to wait and watch. Also, I'd like to know your thoughts on if HyperOS will come to the Indian variant of the Xiaomi 14 Pro, or will it be like Origin OS exclusive to Vivo phones in China and Fun Touch in India? Would it be like that? Let me know in the comments below. One thing about HyperOS that I really like are the animation tuning. Since the whole system implementation has become lighter and it's a lighter install as well right now, the animation speeds have improved so much so that sometimes it looks better than iOS. There, I said it. Alright, let's talk about the camera. Now this time around, you do not get the 1-inch sensor, the IMX989 that we got with the Xiaomi 13 Pro. That has been replaced with the 50MP 1x1.3-inch sensor. And this one's called the Light Fusion 900. It's Xiaomi's very own sensor apparently. I don't know which brand it's working with, but yeah, it's called Light Fusion 900. And apart from that, you got a 50MP JN1 ultra wide angle camera and a 50MP JN1 telephoto 3.2x camera as well. And in the front, you have a 32MP selfie camera too. Now, while the Xiaomi 14 Pro doesn't have that 1-inch sensor, I like the fact that the primary camera has variable aperture now. So you can switch between f1.42 to f4 and you have 10 stops in between as well. Now you can use this only in the Pro mode though. You can also use this when you're shooting video in the Pro mode, but you can only select one aperture at a time. So you can select f1.42 or f1.8 or f2 or f4, whatever you want, but you cannot change the aperture while you're shooting the video. So that's something you have to keep in mind. Having said that, the primary camera with that aperture switch that you can see, the difference between the f1.42 image and the f4 image is stark. You can see the natural bokeh drop off looks so good in the f1.42, and if you want a tack sharp focus on a wider area of the image, then you can use the f4 as well. So this kind of capability is a proper pro tool for camera enthusiasts, and I really like the implementation too. Also, with this 50MP camera, Xiaomi has 13 EV stops that it has improved with HDR performance, and HDR performance when you're shooting landscape pictures is absolutely well done, and I was taken aback at how good it is. In fact, the HDR performance is absolutely fantastic, especially when you're shooting low light pictures. Just take a look at these two samples and look at the kind of crisp light control that Xiaomi has managed to do. It's very well done, and that Leica collaboration is definitely coming in handy. Also, the HDR implementation works really well with the 3.2x telephoto as well. In this specific shot, we were really surprised at how good the dynamic range performance is. Now with the primary camera, when you're shooting pictures, you do not get as many details as the IMX989, but they're good enough. Also, one of the things I must definitely appreciate Xiaomi for is that they've actually improved the Leica Authentic mode. The Leica Authentic mode really looks Leica Authentic right now. It doesn't have those weird vignetting effects around the corner, which was a problem in previous Xiaomi phones with Leica implementation. This time, the Leica Authentic is like a proper flat image. Even with respect to skin tones, if you shoot in Leica Authentic, the skin tones are better compared to Leica Vibrant. By the way, talking about skin tones and people pictures, we really like the kind of pictures that we got with the phone. The portrait mode is very well implemented. It's actually quite a bit better than the Google Pixel 8 Pro if you ask me. With the Xiaomi 14 Pro, you also get different portrait modes like standard, documentary, swirly, and a few others as well. And it uses different focal lengths to achieve the effect, and it does it fairly well. It's not as good as Vivo's implementation, but it's still pretty good. The primary camera's low light performance was also pretty impressive. We were very happy with the kind of night mode shots that we got with it. The only problem that I noticed with the Xiaomi 14 Pro is that when you're shooting people in HDR situations, it tends to really mess up the HDR implementation, and that felt very weird to me because the colors go for a toss, the highlights go for a toss. I expected it to be much better. But in general, I'm very happy with the primary camera performance, and I think that the Xiaomi 14 Pro's primary camera performance is actually better than the Xiaomi 13 Pro. Now, talking about the ultra wide, you get a field of view that is 115 degrees wide. But the ultra wide pictures weren't as detailed as we expected it to be. Also, the color science consistency, while it's good for the most part, it sometimes misses, so it's not as consistent as we generally get with Google, Samsung or Apple phones. Now, talking about low light ultra wide shots, they weren't as impressive as the primary ones. We saw a lot of lens flare happening, and the detail retention could have been slightly better too. Now, the 3.2x telephoto camera on the 14 Pro is very impressive because it's not just telephoto camera, but it's also super macro camera. But talking about the telephoto 3.2x, the pictures that we got with it were very impressive. They are detailed, they are sharp, even the low light performance is very good as well. But the tele macro implementation is clearly superb on the Xiaomi 14 Pro. You do not get the lens distortion that you get with ultra wide macro cameras. The tele macro has been done very well because you can go as close as 10 centimeters of a subject, and the kind of pictures that we got were impressive. I think they're definitely the industry best telemacro or macro implementation on a phone. Now with the 32MP selfie camera, the pictures that we took, the skin tones were not as good as the primary camera, but they're serviceable. And the selfie camera's HDR performance could have been slightly better too. The low light performance especially is not that great. But with selfie portrait mode, the edge cutout and the bokeh drop off has been well done. But what I'm happy about is that the selfie camera can actually shoot 4K 60 FPS videos now, and the video quality is actually very good. The stabilization is pretty good, and the kind of videos that we got looked sharp in daylight, and the low light performance was decent too. In fact, you can shoot 4K 60 FPS videos using the primary, the ultra wide, and the telephoto. So basically all the cameras on the Xiaomi 14 Pro can shoot 4K 60 FPS videos. And these 4K 60 FPS videos are well done, well implemented. Of course, not Apple iPhone level, but in daylight, you can get really good footage out of it. In fact, we were very surprised by the stabilization capabilities of the primary camera itself. And if you want, you can also shoot 4K 60 FPS videos in Dolby Vision format as well. This is going to be 10-bit videos that too. This is going to be a feature that is going to be present on many Android flagships in the future as well. Overall, we are very happy with the camera performance of the Xiaomi 14 Pro, and we can't wait for the global unit or the Indian unit to come so we can compare it with a few other phones. But ideally, we would love to compare it to, of course, the iPhone 15 Pro Max and whatever 8 Gen 3 phones launch in the future. So the iQOO 12 Pro, the OnePlus 12, all of those. So to watch those videos, what you have to do is subscribe to Trakin Tech English. Alright, the Xiaomi 14 Pro with the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 is fantastic. We really like it. We loved using it as well. The performance, of course, it shouldn't have gotten so hot, but it doesn't throttle. So that is something that we can take as a compromise. Also, the global ROM could have better performance with the Xiaomi 14 Pro. We'll have to wait and watch. Overall, good, impressive flagship phone. Definitely a great upgrade over the Xiaomi 13 Pro. But here's the kicker. In China, the price is 4,999 yuan, which is about 58,000 rupees. And of course, it won't come at the 58,000 rupee price, but in China, it's great value, man. And in India, after discounts, even if you get it for 70,000, this is going to be a very good flagship phone to recommend. Only thing we'll have to wait and watch to see how HyperOS implementation has been done in global variants, or if at all that implementation happens. So what do you guys think of the Xiaomi 14 Pro? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.